Yanchi Jambor to the Nimijan, Donner Monum Chamber and Abiada, Banker Dorgum Tondo German, Tumba Tuchi, Janla, Kisham Sar Tenip Jonathan de Jitset and Tamba Kanga will have Kapsarva, Kanga would, to the Lotsamba Tremame Petropi Nander Son Shu, Kanga would, Yang Sorva, Jonathan de Dr. Tamba Deep, John Rejam Chiver Mutro, Techi Lata Jena, Jonathan de Dr. Mumbran Sarva Tichigna. Jonathan de Kirkula, Ninju Shoni, de la Roma Jinsate, the Jamze, Shansala Chimbostava Jikur Gochung, the Homze Torjam Chibada, the Zambachama Mepatroba Term Chine, Dala Chug Gide, and Durka the Jim Cho, Chug Gide. Zumba Kanga Waji, Zum Ji Shirna number, Homze Togni, Kimbir Gochung, the De la under Kitchi, Juso, Jonathan de Girkola, Ninjuction at De la Roma Gune, Den Sarlo, Gibadan, De la under Kitchi, Shogo, Zumba Gangao, De la Dave the Lander Kitchim Chogo, Zumba Gangao, Dirkut Mazerji, Zumba Gangao, Division Shabo, Schooner, Dorjis Tavium, Chabada, Mageva. Mageva Tamchiki, Vachagner Panwe, gave it to Tamchetan, done by Yinla. De la Nimba Kalam Jongte, de la Nyamgawa Kala Yudop, Zumba, Gangao, Jundan de la Curva, Mande Perchan, Mason, Mazer, Flar Sonji, Jansalagan, taken Marmej, Zubjit Cheva, Zubjit Chevil, Harnamdan, Santi Gizane, Kunel Hopi, Shanchu Sanwa, Namki Tusa, Reda. Zumba Gangao, Kurlo Gerbo gives Sava Chungur, Damba Lion, not made na Jundan de gives Satme Patan Dambala, Delak in Kalam Garte, in the money. So Zumba Gangao, Ko Motsavra Mashi, Flar Sonshi, Jan Martajan, Shobada, Gunder Givada, Cherubada, Suabatake, Tusa Reda, the Dagland of Nyam, the Kimao, the Kostumban, Dagnitian, Nava, Jobra Manina. Semchin Nava Takastya Kalani, Yam the Simsa Reda, Gangavo, Kapjam Marnavar Shitji, Sijan Tusaret, Sijan Tusaret, Zumba Gangavo, Devjan Shaba, Nam the Chujir Kurte, Kazi Sorbe, Li Mayano, Devjan Shaba, Nam, Jiktin, Debir Kurte, Jiktinji, Chutamchile, Yantabran Debao, Devjan Shabir Kala, Nopa me parte, Zabatamchile, Lobao, Devjan Shabir Kono, Dimashit, and Dipshit Tamchatam Charo, Zumba Gangavo, Testava La, not Yoperan Dobano. Murgishan Java Mayan no Jim Chene Delap Jundan de Duck Lobro to Shan Lobro Zomra Majirdam Nyamte Dug Rapt Motsavritirdo, Dene Ducky Varnanle, Jatuba Ganga with Chimda Chirtaver Tomba Devjan de Wunjam, Jundan de Snigmi di la Shome di Shirna Simpson Nam. Ammanjan Gurbi Shopar number and dirty, the Vena Gangao, Mozavra Mapshipper, Goma Cherla, Larson Jim Chogo, Jondan de Lazamba Tramame Petroba Tramame Petroba, Tibala Lande Pertamba, Undertate, Jondan de Tislat, Stieva Tamba de John Drejan Children Mostrogo, Devjan de Nyantur Navjatsam, Mustro Tira, de Rangar Popap Jum. Then de la sorto, de Lazambe, de Lazamba Trima, Gandak Lazamba Trima me perturbadan, Tam Shibate, Tamchi Jam Jondan de la sorto.
We now begin teaching the Vimalakirti Sutra. This Vimalakirti Sutra is a very important teaching within Mahayana Buddhism. On one hand, having heard this teaching, it will be of tremendous benefit for both this life and all future lives. Nagarjuna Bodhisattva has a saying that the root of all merits, both seen and unseen, is wisdom. So in order to accomplish all that is seen and unseen, one should uphold and maintain wisdom. There is this saying, the meaning is that in this world, including what we can see now and what cannot be seen in future lives, the source of all these merits is wisdom. But this wisdom is earned through study and reflection. This wisdom, for a very small number of people, might be because the wisdom from their previous lives was never lost and remains present today unchanged and unmoved. Upon the slightest touch, it returns immediately. But for the majority of people, because of certain obstacles encountered during the process of rebirth, it has already been forgotten. Therefore, we need to strive for it on our own. We need to obtain it through our own kind of effort. This is very important. This is something that each one of us, right at the very beginning of our learning, should establish as a correct view. If one does not have a correct view, it may become very difficult later on. The Suramgama Sutra says, if the ground of the cause is not true, the result will come out crooked. If when we are at the stage of the cause, you have not found the correct goal right from the start, then when the result is finally obtained, it will also be bent and not straight. So when many of us first begin to study Buddhism, do not treat the Dharma as something merely external and formal. If you treat the Dharma as something merely formal, indeed in the end you may have studied it for a lifetime, or you may have studied it for a very long time, but in the end, the Buddhism in your eyes may not be the true Buddhism. It might be only one part of Buddhism, or even just an external appearance, merely the outward form of Buddhism. So first of all, we need to encounter correct views and correct guidance. This is extremely important. So I also suggest to everyone here present that going forward in your everyday lives, you should try to carve out some time to study the Dharma. Actually, studying the Dharma is not for anyone else's benefit. It should be for one's own benefit, and even the benefit of life after life. Setting out from this perspective, it is only right for people to develop an interest in studying and reflecting on the Dharma. Otherwise, we may indeed find that after taking refuge for many years in the end, we still do not understand the basic views, conduct, and practices of Buddhism. This would be a great pity. So today we continue with this Vimalakirti Sutra. Previously, we have already taught the 9 great disciples, Mahamodgalyayana Sariputra, Venerable Kashyapa Subhuti, and also Venerable Purna and Katyayana, Aniruddha, Upali, and Rahula. Today we begin teaching Venerable Ānanda. The 9 great disciples before all attained the fruit of arhatship. The final one, Venerable Ānanda, attained the fruit of arhatship only after the Buddha passed into nirvana. Although he is foremost in great learning within Buddhism, being most learned and erudite, some historical accounts say that Ānanda had vast learning of the Tripitaka not only in this life, but even more so, throughout his many lives, he has always been most learned and erudite. Because of his aspirations in previous lives and other karmic conditions, he is a person of very great learning and scholarship. How is Venerable Ānanda's name explained? In Tibetan, it is Kungawo. Kungawo means joy to all. Why is Ānanda called joy? The main reason for this joy is that at the time of his birthday was the same day as the day the Buddha attained enlightenment. So everyone was very joyful. At the time the Buddha attained enlightenment, Prince Suklodana, who was King Suddhodana's brother, actually had 2 sons, and Ānanda is Devadatta's own younger brother and the Buddha's cousin. This is their relationship. It seems that in the Indian film about the Buddha, this relationship is also shown. At the time the Buddha attained enlightenment, Ānanda had just been born. So everyone was very joyful. He was called Ānanda, meaning all rejoice. Everyone rejoices is another way to put it. There is also another account. Because Ānanda's appearance was very fine, his face was like the full moon and his eyes like blue lotus flowers. Whoever saw him was filled with joy. Because his appearance was so attractive, no matter who saw him, he had the ability to make them feel joyful. As we often mention, in some cases, some people bring joy to others. While some are very unpleasant to be around, there are even those who do not please anyone at all. One look at them makes everyone feel unhappy, and such cases do exist. A person's appearance has a great deal to do with their karmic conditions from previous lives. In any case, after Ānanda grew up, it seems he began his life as a monk at the age of 8. Later, he became the Buddha's personal attendant. Serving him for 31 years, he remained by the Buddha's side until the Buddha finally passed into nirvana. Ānanda was right there by his side. In the television series about the Buddha that I watched, he was also there by the Buddha's side in the final scene of nirvana. Actually, I think many of our Dharma friends should know what kind of figure he is in the history of Buddhism. The Lotus Sutra that we studied last year mentions that at that time 2 people generated bodhicitta before Sunyata Raja Tathagata. One was Sakyamuni Buddha, who attained Buddhahood because he was extremely diligent. There was another person who had not yet attained Buddhahood, who was known for being the most widely learned. This was Ānanda. The Buddha was especially diligent. Although both of them had generated bodhicitta before Sunyataraja Tathagata, as time passed, the Buddha reached Buddhahood first and Ānanda attained it later. What was the reason for this? It is because Sakyamuni Buddha was extremely diligent at the stage of the cause. Although Ānanda had not yet attained Buddhahood, he was upholding and protecting the teachings of Sakyamuni Buddha. He was equally dedicated to protecting the teachings of other Tathagatas. So when we discuss this in Buddhism, looking at the relationship between Ānanda and Sakyamuni Buddha in their previous lives, it is clear that diligence is extremely important. Great learning is also important. Some people feel that being widely learned and erudite is everything, but you might not have focused enough on your practice. If you have not persisted in your practice, you might end up like Ānanda. After the Buddha attained enlightenment, Ānanda remained an ordinary attendant. He only attained arhatship after the Buddha passed into nirvana. The difference between these two paths is quite significant. Among us Buddhist practitioners, some persist in their diligence without ceasing. Even if their wisdom is not exceptionally high, they are very, very diligent. In the end, their level of practice becomes quite admirable. On the other hand, some people are very learned and wise, and for a time they seem to be doing well in all aspects, yet they cannot persist in their efforts. They cannot maintain their diligence over the long term. When this happens, they might end up regressing. Among the lay people and monastics I am familiar with, some have very good wisdom, but they could not keep going later on. This includes those around me who have taken part in our oral examinations. Some were not especially gifted with wisdom at first, but they kept on persisting. In the end, they successfully attained different degrees. Of course, we do not seek these degrees for fame. However, they can represent a kind of accomplishment. From a practical standpoint, we establish certain standards to measure one's realization. When someone surpasses these standards, it shows progress. While this might not necessarily hold true on the ultimate level, on the conventional level, there is truly a great difference in a person's diligence. Just like Sakyamuni Buddha at the stage of the cause, who was always continuously learning and practicing, we should not give up just because we encounter certain issues. The main reasons most of us give up are either a bad mood, poor health, being especially busy, or facing some other interference. Mepham Rinpoche has a verse about this. Although I do not remember it clearly, the meaning is that you should not give up while studying and practicing. Do not allow any adverse conditions the opportunity to take hold. Always seek the blessing of Manjusri's wisdom and work to enhance all favorable conditions. So throughout our many lives, we should not let a minor obstacle destroy everything immediately. Some of us might wonder, who hasn't encountered adverse conditions in life? It is impossible. Everyone faces them. Even the bodhisattvas and esteemed masters we all acknowledge frequently had to face many misfortunes while propagating the Dharma and benefiting beings. They also encountered many obstacles in their own practice, but they always persisted, and there were results in the end. This is why Westerners, including many scientists and many leaders, often emphasize one thing. During their speeches and throughout their learning, what they praise most is never giving up. They strive continuously without stopping. They bravely face all confusion and all obstacles. Each and every one of them, including some truly great presidents during their inauguration ceremonies, will also emphasize this quality. Many scientists throughout their creative work also primarily emphasize this kind of idea. I cannot speak too broadly, otherwise we will not be able to complete today's task. Next, let us talk about Venerable Ānanda, our main focus for today. Each day we discuss one of the 10 great disciples of the Buddha. If the Vimalakirti Sutra were made into a film, it would be quite good, wouldn't it? This wouldn't be for the sake of making money, but to showcase each of the 10 great disciples. In the future, if we hold a Vajra entertainment festival, 10 people could participate. One person could play Katyayana, another could play Ānanda, and someone could play the layman Vimalakirti. Vimalakirti would then make each of the monastics feel embarrassed. The story would continue in this way. Next, the text says that the Buddha told Ānanda, "You go inquire about Vimalakirti's illness. Go there to visit him while he is ill, and see how he has been doing lately." The Buddha would often say such things. We often have Dharma friends and others related to us who are in similar situations. In today's Dharma Master Conference, I requested the Khenpos and Khenmos to check if anyone around them has fallen ill. I asked them to start visiting and taking care of them regularly, or to find ways to resolve their difficulties. regardless of a person's status. Once they fall ill, they need people to visit them. Of course, sometimes if a person has no worries regarding any aspect of their life, they might not need anyone to inquire. In fact, having no one inquire could be the best way for them to relax. Otherwise, if one person visits today and another visits tomorrow, it could actually be quite painful for them. But for some people, care and attention are necessary. It really depends on the situation. If a patient truly does not wish to see anyone, you should not go to their door and make a scene by crying. Their body is already unwell, and the sound of crying outside might make their pain even more intense. It is hard to say what kind of effect this might manifest, so we should inquire according to the situation. Some patients, even while they are ill, continue to give teachings. They give a teaching to everyone who comes to visit them, just like the layman Vimalakirti. Today we discuss the final disciple in the Shravaka tradition. The Buddha told Ānanda to go and inquire. Ānanda, just like all the previous disciples, said to the Buddha, "World-honored one, I am just the same as the disciples before me. I truly do not dare to take on this important task. I dare not accept your instruction to go inquire about his illness." Why? The reason is as follows. I remember once in the past, an incident like this occurred. Once the Buddha's body was manifesting a minor illness. Some commentaries state that at that time the Buddha was manifesting a wind disorder. Wind, bile, and phlegm, as described in Tibetan medicine, are the three root disorders. Most cases of a wind disorder can be treated with milk. Many Chinese medicine practitioners say the same. This includes cow's milk, sheep's milk, and goat's milk. In some accounts, horse milk is mentioned, along with camel's milk. There are various accounts. Generally speaking, milk is sold everywhere in our Larungar now. It is even available at the mandala. The other day when I visited the Jetsunma's place, I saw that they had stored milk in mineral water bottles. But for some people, such as those with insufficient nutrition, rheumatic disease, or a calcium deficiency in the body, supplementing with calcium and other nutrients can have a beneficial effect. In the past, in the Tibetan region, many elderly people whose bodies were especially weak or lacking in strength would often use cow's milk. Cow's milk is better before the butter has been extracted. Once the butter is taken out, the essence is gone. Of course, with some of the milk on the market today, it is hard to say what the quality is really like. Previously, some milk had melamine added to it. There are various accounts, but in the Tibetan region, such things likely do not happen. For instance, in countries like New Zealand and Australia, their cows are mostly raised in feeding facilities. The sight of them grazing on wild herbs in the mountains is actually quite rare there. As for the Tibetan region, generally the yaks eat the natural grass on the mountains and drink the clear mountain water. It is said that their milk is richer in nutrients and minerals. That may well be the case. Indian cows, it seems, and our Tibetan yaks are still quite different. They have a very distinct appearance. They look more like the dairy cows found in the Han region. When we traveled to India back then, there was a lama who accompanied us. We stayed there for several months and traveled to southern India. As time passed, everyone began to miss the Tibetan region. One of the lamas in our group, upon seeing the local Indian dairy cows nearby, became very excited. He exclaimed, "Look, look, our cows are right there." But when we went to take a closer look, they were completely different from our Tibetan yaks. They were the kind of dairy cows typically seen in big cities. They weren't like the Tibetan kind of cow at all. So we joked with him and said, "You must be very homesick, because these are definitely not Tibetan yaks. They are an Indian breed." You see, whenever someone mentions Tibetan yaks, they even start singing Tibetan songs. Returning to the subject of the milk, at that time the world-honored one was ill. The illness of the world-honored one was actually a manifestation. As described in the Maharatnakuta Sutra, even things like the Buddha's back pain are manifested to help beings recognize the suffering of illness. By showing that even the Vajra body of the Buddha can experience such illness, it makes us realize our own condition. We sometimes see masters and accomplished practitioners who truly do manifest illness toward the end of their lives. At such times, people with wrong views might think, "Oh, even this master or that practitioner is falling ill." It seems they have no realization at all. My own practice must be useless as well. They might even give up their practice. But for those with a pure mind, they understand that if these masters of great merit manifest illness at the end, then my own afflicted body is certainly not something to rely on. What else is there to say? Therefore, they develop an even stronger renunciation towards samsara and gain greater confidence in practicing virtue for their future lives. So the manifestation of illness actually holds profound and varied meanings. At that time, Ānanda took his bowl and proceeded to the gateway of a great Brahman home. The home was as grand as a shala tree, with a very impressive entrance. He stood at the door of this Brahman family very early in the morning. The Tang translation mentions that after arranging his Dharma robes early in the morning, he arrived there. I will briefly summarize the story that follows. Because this Brahman was also a disciple with karmic affinity whom the Buddha intended to guide. This Brahman was very prestigious and belonged to a particularly prominent clan. He reportedly had a retinue of 50,000 people under him. However, he had one notable characteristic, which was that he was extremely miserly. He was usually unwilling to give away anything at all. Even the courtyard of his enormous mansion was covered with netting. This was mainly to prevent small birds and other fowl from entering his courtyard to eat his grain, even grain by individual grain. So he was an exceptionally miserly Brahmin. When Ānanda arrived at his door, the Brahmin was put in a spot. There is actually a dedicated sutra about this. It is called the Dugdaprabha Sutra, which can be found in the Tripitaka. Please have a look at it when you have the opportunity. I also noticed that in Master Uyizikshu's Yuezang Jijin, this story is described in a brief summary. It was translated by Dharmaraksha. It hasn't been found in the Tibetan canon, but it does exist in the Chinese canon. It might exist in Tibetan as well, but it hasn't been located yet. When the Brahmin saw Ānanda coming to beg for alms, he found himself in a very awkward position. If he didn't give Ānanda the milk, he worried people would say such a wealthy Brahmin was incredibly stingy. He feared the gossip and idle talk. That was one concern. On the other hand, if he did give it, he belonged to a traditional Brahmin clan. He worried what his peers would say if he associated with a disciple of Gautama Buddha. He feared his community would judge him for it. So he eventually tried to play a clever trick. Among his livestock, there were some mother cows that were particularly wild and ferocious. He then told Ānanda, "Go to that certain place where the mother cows are. You may collect the milk yourself there." The Brahmin thought that if Ānanda went to those mother cows, which were especially wild and agitated, not only would he fail to get any milk, but the cows might even harm or kill him. Those yaks were known to be particularly fierce. Even now at our Larongar, we have some yaks. Please do not try to get too close to them. They can be very aggressive. Some of them, after drinking the alcohol offered with the tormas for the Dharma protectors, become quite formidable from what I hear. Some of our Dharma friends often approach them while reciting Om Mani Padme Hum. Do not assume that you are liberating them. It is more likely that they will be the ones to liberate you. Generally speaking, you must stay away from wild yaks and wild dogs. Some of our Dharma friends particularly love to play with dogs. When they see a stray dog, they call out, come here, wah, wah, wah." But when the dog suddenly charges at you, you just scream and start running away. This is extremely dangerous behavior. So Dharma friends, you really need to protect yourselves. It seems some people are not careful enough around wild cats, dogs, or yaks, or even around strangers. All of these situations require your caution. If you aren't careful, these encounters can be life-threatening. Usually you can tell at a glance if an animal is wild. You can recognize the danger quite easily. However, some may appear fairly docile at first, but when you approach them, they might suddenly become aggressive out of aversion. Consider the wild bulls in Spain as an example. Everyone is familiar with them. Every year during the bullfighting events, as we were told when we visited there, many people, including the bullfighters, lose their lives because of these encounters. A great number of people die every year from interacting with them. In their culture, dying this way is seen as a very honorable thing. They likely have various ceremonies dedicated to this. We don't have any such ceremonies here. When your time comes, you are simply gone. You are just placed in the charnel ground and recite Om Mani Padme Hum. At that time, the Brahmin as I was saying, this Brahmin intended to lead Ānanda to those wild mother cows. Venerable Ānanda then prepared to go there. On his way, 500 Brahmins, who were disciples of that same Brahmin, began to slander the Buddha. They said, "The Buddha claims to be the most honored in heaven and earth, and says he can liberate all beings from old age, sickness, and death. Yet the Buddha cannot even cure his own illness. Since he is ill and needs milk now, how is he supposed to liberate others? They started spreading such talk. While these people were slandering the Buddha, Vimalakirti the layman appeared. What follows is their dialogue. Vimalakirti said to Ānanda, "Go quickly, otherwise people will speak ill of us. Go now, go now." And then they had a conversation. After this conversation concluded, Ānanda felt conflicted hearing Vimalakirti's words. Alongside the slander from the heterodox practitioners, he began to have some doubts. He wondered, I have attended the Buddha for so long. Is it possible I still don't understand the Buddha's true intent? Or have I misheard some of the Buddha's teachings? What exactly is going on here? He thought it might be better to return without the milk. Just then, a voice from the sky spoke to him. A voice resonated from above saying, "Although the Buddha is as you know, what Vimalakirti said is correct. However, you should still proceed this time, because the Buddha is manifesting illness for the sake of all beings. Under these circumstances, obtaining milk is meaningful. It will serve the purpose of the Buddha's manifestation." So Ānanda continued on his way. As he went along, as described in a commentary on the Vimalakirti Sutra, it is said that Ānanda finally reached the mother cow. When the mother cow saw Ānanda, instead of trying to harm or trample him, she showed him great reverence. She spoke in human language and said, "I usually just eat grass and drink water, but since my milk can benefit the Buddha's body, you may take it freely." At that time, the mother cow had two small calves. They were also filled with joy. They knelt down alongside their mother. The mother cow knelt before Ānanda, and the calves knelt as well. They said, "We do not need to drink our mother's milk. It should be offered to the Buddha." So Ānanda collected the milk and returned to the Buddha. Did the Buddha drink the milk or not? This part of the narrative does not make that very clear. However, it is said that one of the calves would later become Dugdaprabha Tathagata. In fact, the name of this sutra was derived from that event. Actually, the point of this entire story is that there are many such manifestations within Buddhism. Regarding the principles behind these manifestations, all of you present here should reflect on them carefully. While you are engaged in study and reflection, you should maintain a sense of rational thinking. Do not always assume that your own conceptual thoughts are correct. Our conceptual thoughts might be correct at certain times, but at other times they can be very one-sided and biased. They can be very narrow. Some of us, especially those with certain backgrounds, such as graduates from prestigious universities, doctoral students, or those holding high professional titles, may naturally harbor a sense of arrogance. You might think, "I graduated from such and such a school," or "I am a renowned master." But we must realize that the knowledge we have acquired might only make us experts within a very specific domain. When measured against the true nature of the entire universe, or the ultimate truth of all phenomena, our wisdom may still be quite far from the truth. In such moments, we should do as we discussed earlier. Everyone should let go of the outer shell of their reputation and status. Instead, we should manifest as a very ordinary seeker of knowledge. If you seek the truth with that kind of humility, you will be fully capable of attaining the most ultimate theory and the most ultimate wisdom. Otherwise, if we wrap ourselves in a shell of pride, it can directly block the knowledge we are meant to receive. So while learning Buddhism, no matter what your background or status may be, you should approach it with a humble mind, as well as reverence and joy. You should also remain fair and stay objective. Receiving the teachings with this mindset is essential. This is very important. As I mentioned briefly just now, there is a sutra known as the Buddhabhashita Dugda Prabha Sutra. Dugda refers to milk and Prabha means radiance or light. In this sutra, the entire interaction between Vimalakirti and Ānanda is described in much greater detail. If you understand the context of this story, you will be able to grasp today's content easily. As I said, Ānanda went to wait at the great Brahman's door early in the morning. After speaking with the Brahman, he went to collect the milk. While he was on his way, Vimalakirti the layman approached him. He said to Ānanda, "Oh Ānanda, why are you standing here with your bowl so early in the morning?" He was questioning why Ānanda was out so early. Some commentaries mention that in ancient India, most monastics followed the rule of 1 meal a day at midday. They would only go out to collect alms around noon. However, there was Ānanda early in the morning, waiting at the Brahman's house to collect milk. Of course, in the modern Theravada tradition, including in Thailand, Myanmar, Laos, and Cambodia, the monastics in these countries do go out to collect alms with their bowls in the morning. The food they bring back in the morning is all placed in their bowls, and they have their breakfast once they return to the monastery. After breakfast, the remaining food in the bowls is handed over to the lay managers. After they have organized the food, it is offered to the Sangha again at midday. This seems to be the practice in many Theravada communities now, at least in the specific places I have visited. I actually looked into this in some detail. I wonder if they still go out for alms during the midday hours as well. Does anyone here know? Have you seen this? Is that how it works in Sri Lanka? I was actually planning to visit Sri Lanka a while ago, but as it turned out, I wasn't able to go. There is nothing to be done about that. Has anyone been there? Do they go out in the morning, or do the donors bring the food to the monastery? Okay. Why are you standing here this early? Vimalakirti asked. Vimalakirti, the layman, had also arrived quite early. He likely kept a close watch on what the monastics were doing. He was quite a formidable layman. Everyone was a bit intimidated by him. Even though he was ill, why was he still running around to all these places? He used to be very active before his illness. He would interact with many people when he was healthy. Naturally, people have many social interactions when they are well, but once they fall ill, those interactions tend to decrease. At that time, Venerable Ānanda replied, "O retired scholar, the world-honored one has a slight illness. He is manifesting an illness. This condition is somewhat special and requires cow's milk. From the perspective of traditional medicine, milk is needed, so I have come here to beg for some." Venerable Ānanda explained his reason for coming to Vimalakirti. Vimalakirti then said, "Stop, do not say such things. O Ānanda, do not speak thus." In the Tibetan version, it simply says, "Do not say such things." Other versions might be similar, where some include this phrase while others do not. Stop, stop, be silent, do not say this. Silence. Some commentaries record it as, "Ānanda, you must not speak like this. The Tathagata's body is in truth a Vajra body. Do not say this. You should never say that the Tathagata is ill. By no means should you say this." Vimalakirti then gave several reasons why. The first reason is that the Tathagata's body is a Vajra body. This means that Tathagata's body is indestructible. This can be explained from two perspectives. According to the accounts of Master Kuiji, this primarily refers to the Tathagata's Sambhogakaya. From this level, the Tathagata's body is indestructible. He also mentions later that the Tathagata's body is the Dharmakaya. When we speak from the level of the Dharmakaya, the Tathagata's body is also indestructible. The text states that the Tathagata's body is a Vajra body. This Vajra body has many profound aspects. Vajra possesses 7 types of qualities. It cannot be damaged or destroyed. It cannot be pierced or broken. It is firm and indestructible. The Mahaparinirvana Sutra says, "The body of the Tathagata is eternally abiding and indestructible. It is a Vajra body, not one sustained by defiled food. It is the Dharmakaya and should be perceived as such." The sutra elaborates on this at length. The Mahaparinirvana Sutra explains that the Tathagata's body is eternally abiding. It is a body that will never be destroyed. It is like a Vajra. It was not formed by defiled food, unlike the impure bodies of ordinary people. In reality, whether as Dharmakaya or Sambhogakaya, these bodies cannot be easily harmed or destroyed. So just as the Mahaparinirvana Sutra describes, the Tathagata's body is an indestructible body. That is the first reason. The second reason is that evils are already eradicated and all goods are universally assembled. What illness could it have? What vexation could there be? To elaborate on this second reason, over the course of 3 great Asamkhyeya kalpas, the Buddha has purified all natural and prescribed evils. All evil has been completely severed at the root, even down to the habitual tendencies. In addition, all virtues have been fully gathered. If that is the case, how could there be any affliction or illness? How could such things even be possible? We all know that when our own bodies are unwell, it may be because external conditions are not in harmony, or that we have created negative karma. Illness is the ripening of that negative karma. It also stems from the unwholesome thoughts in our own minds. Illness is simply the result of those actions. For most of us, when we are sick, It is because the evil actions of the past have now ripened into a result. Meanwhile, our virtuous power to counteract it is extremely weak. This is the fundamental reason we fall ill. However, the Tathagata does not have these conditions. So if someone's health is particularly poor, it may be that they have accumulated a lot of negative karma. Taking medicine constantly seems to have no effect. Even getting injections or treatments does not help. Massage or moxibustion, all sorts of methods are tried every day. But for some, the more they try, the worse their body feels. Naturally, one starts to feel very discouraged. Some people then point the finger at the doctor. Why is this doctor so incompetent? In truth, we should not blame the doctor, but rather reflect on ourselves. Doctor, why aren't you treating me properly? I've spent so much money, and I am still not better. Actually, there is no need for such complaints. The Tathagata is not like this at all, because all of his evils have been severed. Sthiramati's Mahayana Shastra, which is a very important Indian commentary, establishes Mahayana as the authentic Dharma. It says the body of the Tathagata is like a vajra. Since all evils are extinguished, how could there be illness? This means that the Tathagata's body is like a vajra. And what is the reason for this? It is because all evil was severed long ago. Since evil has been completely eradicated, how could he suffer from various illnesses? It is absolutely impossible. Therefore, as explained here, there can be no illness because all evil has been severed. Furthermore, through the practice of virtue, illness is also avoided. In the Mahayana Shastra, there is a passage describing a bhikshu from long ago who frequently offered and gave medicine to others. Due to the ripening of this positive karma, he was reborn among celestial beings for many kalpas. He lived until he was 80 or 90 years old, yet throughout his entire life his body never suffered a single illness. This health continued across his many lives. So when we offer medicine to monastics and the Sangha, it brings immense benefit to our own physical health. Some people offer medicine to the Sangha, while others give to those who are not monastics, including anyone in need of medical attention. If we provide medicine for free, then we will enjoy health throughout our many future lives. The lay teacher Nan Huaijin also mentioned that there was once an elderly man in his 70s or 80s. When Nan Huaijin was still young, that elderly man claimed he had never experienced a physical illness. He had never fallen ill once in his entire life. Nan Huaijin personally witnessed such a person in his youth. He also met another person who was 68 years old. He said that this 68-year-old had never once dreamed in his life. The man asked Nan Huaijin what exactly is a dream. Nan probably found it difficult to explain. Even after being told, the man simply had no experience of dreaming. Perhaps he slept very deeply, but the reason remains unknown. Such unusual cases do exist in this world. Some people may live completely free of any physical ailments. As for the Tathagata, he has no illness at all. And this does not apply only to the Buddha. When one attains the state of an Arya, they also become free from illness. In the Uttaratantra Shastra, there is a scriptural citation that says, I recently cited this passage on my Tibetan blog. It is a quote that many people often use. The Uttaratantra Shastra states, noble ones have already uprooted death, illness, old age, and suffering. This means the three great sufferings of death, aging, and illness arising from karma and afflictions, they have none, hence those two are absent. Because they have no karma or afflictions, these noble ones do not experience aging, illness, or death. On the ultimate level, birth, aging, sickness, and death have all been transcended. Maitreya Bodhisattva also teaches this point. The Uttaratantra Shastra says, noble ones have already severed death, illness, and old age. Born from karma and afflictions, they have none, hence those two cease. Such sufferings simply do not exist for them. So, although we might observe, as the Uttaratantra Shastra explains later, certain noble ones appearing to fall ill, age, and die, these are manifestations performed for the sake of sentient beings. This is how we should understand it. The core message here is that illness cannot truly exist for the Buddha. You need not go, and you should stop collecting alms. Vimalakirti then told him, Ānanda, do not revile the Tathagata. Do not let anyone hear such coarse talk. Do not say the Buddha is ill or seriously unwell. We often encounter different types of people, from those lacking faith in their spiritual teacher to those whose faith is overly emotional. "Oh, the master is about to pass away. He is going to die." They might cry, make a scene, and feel deeply saddened. They might even beat their chests or tear at their hair. By reacting this way, they are actually treating the master as if he were just an ordinary person. When His Holiness Jigme Phuntsok Rinpoche was still with us, he was hospitalized once, as were Venerable Achuk Rinpoche and the Dakini Nyen Lamo. Someone said to me, "I thought these masters were supposed to be extraordinary. How can they not even maintain their own health? Now all these great Dharma kings are in different hospitals." I replied that in reality, there are many beings in hospitals who need to be guided by appearing to be ill. These masters can reach and help many people. So from my personal perspective, when these masters manifest illness, it is always with a purpose. Of course, this is how we understand it as people of faith. If someone has no faith, they might think differently. Some Western scholars often suggest that while a master may have merits in a specific area of Dharma, in every other way he is exactly like anyone else. They see no real difference. To them, masters are simply specialists who can, for example, give empowerments. They can teach Tantra or share pith instructions, and that is just their particular skill. In all other respects, they appear quite ordinary. That is one common viewpoint. However, there are others, both in the West and East, who regard the master as the Buddha himself. If a master were just an ordinary person like us, then his capacity, wisdom, and blessings would be no different from our own. But in reality, they are profoundly different. This includes the master's visible and invisible capacity to guide beings, which is also different. Sometimes we can tell that a certain master looks very ordinary on the surface. They eat and sleep together with others, and many of their actions are just like an ordinary person. But in reality, the realization within his mind and the wisdom within his mind stream are completely different from those of an ordinary person. So, the finding comfort and ease in the nature of mind also teaches that the so-called master, on one hand, is the same as all other people. On the other hand, he is quite unlike others. Of course, each of us may evaluate this, especially those without faith who only assess with a theoretical or objective approach. Then all these Vajra masters and masters in general are seen as the same. Not to mention ordinary people, even Shravakayana practitioners, think that even the Buddha's body is an afflicted body. They feel that the Buddha's wisdom has matured, but his body is entirely an afflicted body. They feel it is not worthy of reverence or prostration. To them, the main thing is to revere the wisdom body within his mind stream. This kind of view also exists. Therefore, at this time, the distinctions between ourselves and others should also be distinguished clearly. He then said, "Do not revile the Tathagata. If you say this and others hear it, it is very bad. Who might hear it? Do not allow the gods of awesome power and virtue to hear these words, and do not let the bodhisattvas who have come from pure lands hear them. Do not go around saying this everywhere." When he spoke, perhaps some people among humans heard it. Otherwise, celestial beings and bodhisattvas have the divine ear faculty, so they may have heard it long ago anyway. At the time of speaking to Vimalakirti the layman, the celestial beings had already heard. But Vimalakirti told him not to speak like this, and not to speak loudly. Otherwise, what if all the celestial beings hear it? It would be terrible if bodhisattvas from other pure lands heard it. Then right afterward, Vimalakirti said, "Even a small degree of blessings allows the wheel-turning sage king to be without illness. This is because the wheel-turning king has certain karmic conditions fairly similar to the Buddha. His appearance is also very magnificent. His lifespan is also very long, and there is no illness in his body. He has no defilements, is magnificent, and so on. So for the wheel-turning king, attaining a state of no illness through a small portion of merit, how could the immeasurable blessings of the Tathagata fail to exceed his in every regard? He completely surpasses all worldly noble ones. So how could the Tathagata have illness? He has none." So at that time, Vimalakirti, it is raining. Since it is raining, many people may not have brought an umbrella. When you go back in a moment, it will also be a kind of bath. He then said this, "Go, Ānanda, do not make us experience this shame." The Tathagata certainly would not got sick. Even the wheel-turning king would not fall ill. How could the Tathagata have such illness? "Sir, go in secret haste and do not let anyone hear this. Just head back quickly. Do not let us people do something so shameful. If others say the Tathagata is ill and begging for milk, how embarrassing, even now in the world. collecting alms for a monastery or for a master is actually a disgrace for a Buddhist. It is also especially embarrassing. I have seen some people often claiming to represent a certain master. Even if the master truly did request such alms, it is not entirely clear. As for me, I have no attendants. But people around me often say, the Khenpo needs a carpet for his home. Can you help with this? The Khenpo's eyes are not very well lately. Could you provide some eye drops? It seems he has not been eating well recently. Could you make some pickled vegetables? Although the matters are very small, a jar of pickles or a bottle of eye drops is nothing significant. But when things are spoken of like this, in reality it is some people around, familiar people often saying these things. I find it quite bothersome. Because if things are like this in small ways, then in larger ways there might be needing this or needing that. If one has power and ability, they will certainly say such things. As they used to say in primary school, if you steal a needle when small, you will steal a cow when grown. There is such a saying. So for some people, even now in the Han region, some claim to represent a certain monastery, while others claim to represent a certain master. Sometimes a master and their attendant arrive together. The attendant says our master is truly outstanding. He is the emanation of such and such a Buddha, or the emanation of such and such a noble one. But right now, he urgently needs to purchase a vehicle. Although an emanation can manifest miraculously, walking is still very inconvenient for him. So they ask if you can help. Or they say the master urgently needs a villa in a certain city. Otherwise, propagating the Dharma and benefiting beings would be very inconvenient. Some attendants speak this way. In other cases, it is not an attendant, but a capable assistant who does this. Or perhaps it is certain lay people who often use the names of others to claim that this or that is needed. In such cases, in reality, some people are quite easily deceived. They say, oh, is that really so? For the sake of his long-term presence in this world, I must raise this money. They think there is no problem at all. And even just the other day, someone called me. They said they had withdrawn all of their bank savings. But now, looking at the outcome, it seems not so good. So sometimes, during the Buddha's time, Ānanda should have understood the Buddha's intent most clearly. Yet when he went to the city to collect alms, he also made some mistakes. One could put it that way. You see, Vimalakirti, the layman, said as a layperson, do not do something so shameful. It is quite terrible. So in the future, to speak more broadly and indirectly about this, whether it is for Buddhism or for the master, if you do not know the master's profound intent, or do not understand the meaning of Buddhist teachings, please try not to use anyone's name to collect alms. If you do not know the situation yourself, know that some of the people around masters are quite good. They never tell others that the master needs this or that while going around everywhere. However, some people are constantly calling everyone they know. They claim this place or that place needs something, whether it is truly needed or not. I think a truly genuine practitioner or a truly genuine master does not depend on such external things. Whether it is pickled vegetables, salted vegetables, or sour vegetables, if one relies on collecting alms for these to sustain oneself, it is quite pitiful. So everyone should be careful and take note of this. Otherwise, as it says here, do not make us experience this shame. He said, if Brahmins in the heterodox paths hear these words, they will think in this way. They will say, is the Buddha not the teacher of gods and humans, yet he is unable to save himself? Is he not also the great physician king, who heals all physical and mental illnesses of sentient beings? If he cannot even save himself from illness, how could he save others of their ills in the world? Indeed, some conduct of this kind affects Buddhism in this way. Regarding the Vimalakirti Sutra, I feel it explains many afflictions very clearly. As Buddhists, we should also observe this. You see, even Venerable Ānanda sometimes did not understand the Buddha very well. On one hand, it was perhaps because he manifested as an ordinary person. On the other hand, he had not understood the Buddha's profound intent. He then said, Sir, go in secret haste and do not let anyone hear this. Sir here refers to the Venerable Ānanda. Go in secret haste. Go quietly and without a sound. Leave quickly and do not go around collecting alms everywhere. When we sometimes see people collecting alms like this, we also stop them on the spot. Nowadays, many people do not appreciate my approach. This is because I often speak about this very publicly in class. Some of them tell me, your future is in great danger because you have blocked the source of income for others. When you interfere with the interests of others, No one will be easy on you. In this era, regardless of what happens, my original intention is for the sake of the Dharma. Whether it happens to me or to others, mostly I'm saying this to myself. Around me, in all these years of teaching the Dharma, indeed, individuals who act improperly also appear from time to time. But at the same time, I also see that just as the omniscient Longchenpa said in the last verse of advice in 30 points, whether seeing one's own conduct or that of others, one gives rise to renunciation. Truly, we sometimes see that many types of conduct are not very optimistic. In this case, Vimalakirti, the layman, was correct in what he said at that time. He told the one collecting alms to leave quickly. The Buddha has no need for such things. Sometimes we also act in this way. When we see people collecting alms for masters or Dharma centers, please try to advise them. Lay people should also offer some advice. If the person is a monastic, the master does not necessarily need these things. What the master truly needs is the authentic Dharma. What the master needs is to benefit sentient beings and to dispel the darkness within the mind streams of beings. For truly accomplished masters, these outward material possessions are truly like impure filth to them. They will not have any clinging toward them. So one should not go around everywhere helping masters seek wealth. Do not go everywhere soliciting donations for the master, whether for a Dharma assembly or other activities for the master. I once encountered an elderly great master in the past. He has already passed into nirvana now. I asked him if anyone from his monastery, including his relatives, frequently visited the Han region. I asked if this was very beneficial for the monastery. He replied that it was mainly beneficial for the person themselves. As for the monastery, it might also be beneficial. That was his response at the time. So sometimes those who collect alms in the name of a master, whether for the master or for other causes, perhaps only benefit themselves as individuals. It is hard to say if there is any real benefit for others. If anyone uses our names, you must absolutely not believe them. In our experience over these past 30-odd years, whether within Larangar or with so many projects, including the construction of teaching halls, it has all come from our own inner strength. We have never gone out to collect alms or personally sent people. None of that has ever happened. So today, as Ānanda went to collect alms, Vimalakirti, the layman, rebuked him. Indirectly speaking, many disciples of various masters might say, the master needs an iPhone 6 or an iPhone 7. The master really needs the best iPhone available now. Now, many people truly act this way. We sometimes hear about this and feel quite strange. What would those masters possibly need these things for? I hope the masters do not take offense at my words. However, one should focus on the Dharma, right? Venerable Ānanda did not get angry either. When Vimalakirti the layman spoke to him, Ānanda understood. So as lay people, we should also use our wisdom. Some say one cannot speak like this or there will be no merit. In these situations, people often consider their own interests more. At that time, it was said, you should understand, Ānanda, the bodies of the Tathagatas are bodies of the Dharma, not bodies of longing. This is where the teaching on the Dharmakaya begins. The Tathagata's body is the Dharmakaya. It is not a product of the desires of the desire realm. Some say it is not a body produced by ordinary food. The Tibetan translation also mentions this. The Avatamsaka Sutra says the Dharma body is eternally tranquil, pure, and without dual signs, yet to transform sentient beings, it manifests in various forms. The Buddha's own Dharmakaya is eternally peaceful and still. It is without duality or dualistic grasping. But for the sake of benefiting sentient beings, he manifests in all kinds of forms. So from the perspective of his Dharmakaya and his ultimate body, there will be no such illness. The Buddha is the world-honored one who has transcended the triple world. The Buddha is within our entire triple world, the most precious and supreme in the world. He has transcended the desire, form, and formless realms. He is already in such a state. The Buddha's body is without flaws, the flaws having been extinguished. The Buddha's body is entirely an indestructible and undefiled body. As the Abhidharmakosa says regarding outflows, dharmas connected to the 6 doors of outflows are called afflicted dharmas. These include naturally arising transgressions, associated transgressions, and causal transgressions. There are many types of outflows. In the lower Abhidharma or our Abhidharmakosa, there is co-arisen increase and object-based increase. Such dharmas are referred to as an afflicted body. But the Buddha completely lacks this kind of body. The Buddha's body is unconditioned and does not fit analytic categories. In the Tibetan, this means departing from conditioned dharmas. Other versions, including the Tang translation, say it departs from enumeration. Actually, conditioned dharmas and enumeration are the same here. The Buddha does not possess those. In reality, he has departed from all extremes. He is free from all forms and conditioned dharmas. The Mahaparinirvana Sutra says he attained this Vajra body by protecting the Dharma. So this is not a conditioned state. It is an undefiled, unconditioned, and indestructible body. Regarding this indestructible body, in the Mahaparinirvana Sutra, there was once a bhikshu of the authentic Dharma. While this bhikshu was propagating the authentic Dharma, there was another bhikshu who followed false teachings. This precept-breaking bhikshu became very jealous and prepared to harm him with all kinds of weapons. At that time, the king was deeply devoted to protecting the authentic Dharma. He came to the aid of the bhikshu of authentic Dharma, and he went to war against the precept-breaking bhikshu. As it turned out, the power of the precept-breaking bhikshu was very great. The king was wounded, his whole body covered in injuries. When the king was nearing death, he made a solemn vow. He vowed to depart from this world for the sake of protecting the authentic Dharma. Later, because of the result of this karma, he attained an indestructible body throughout his many lives. In reality, this king was the Buddha himself during a previous lifetime on the path. The bhikshu of authentic Dharma is said to have been a lifetime of Kashyapa Buddha. There are similar accounts from the past as well. In general, if one wholeheartedly protects the authentic Dharma, we might not necessarily prevail in the moment, because in this degenerate age, the power of false Dharma is sometimes very great. Even kings have no way to resist it. At such a time, perhaps we may not have the opportunity to prevail in this life, but throughout our many lives to come, there will be the opportunity to propagate the Dharma. Life is truly wondrous. Each person's karmic conditions and future are all uncertain. Some of us may depart from this world exactly as we expected, completely in line with our own thoughts and projections. For others, things you never could have imagined will happen. When such a time comes, whether these events happen to oneself or to others, everyone must not act impulsively. One should face it with wisdom and reason. Now, there seems to be some information online concerning how the layman Nan Huaijin knew about certain things that would happen to a particular Dharma master. I listened to it briefly. Some of what he said is quite accurate. But sometimes I think that when something happens to someone, including to their own disciples, many people's minds begin to waver. Actually, this is a very bad sign. No matter what tradition you follow or what you are currently studying, if you have a very firm and steadfast confidence, then even if something happens to those Dharma masters or abbots, even when obstacles arise for them, your own confidence will never change. However, for many of us, confidence tends to change along the way. For instance, when a person is famous or successful, or when we receive some personal benefit, one is especially reverential toward them. But once that person loses their status, one becomes disrespectful or even begins to slander them. So each one of us, especially when protecting the teachings of our own master, must often reflect while the master is still in this world. We should think, if my master were no longer present, how would I protect his teachings? You cannot protect his physical body. His truly indestructible body is in reality his Dharmakaya vitality and his wisdom. How can his wisdom be allowed to continue? It is very important to give this much consideration and preparation. Once your master has departed from this world, once he has left this world, crying is of no use at that point. At that time, one should properly protect his authentic Dharma. This is very important. A body such as this, how could it be ill? How could it be vexed? This is what Vimalakirti the layman told him. At that time, Ānanda said, at the time, world-honored one, I was really ashamed. He was especially ashamed at that time. He felt, could it be that I have not drawn close to the Buddha at all, or had I misheard? Because as a personal attendant, he should know the master's intent. But he felt he had been mistaken all along. Or misheard, or what? At this time, a voice sounded from the sky. Regarding this voice from the sky, Master Kuiji and Kumarajava both translated as it is not clear whose voice it was. It might be celestial beings or Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. In any case, a voice came from the sky. Of course, if they did not know, we would know even less. Then within this voice it was said, Ānanda, it is as the retired scholar has said. But the Buddha manifests this Dharma to emancipate sentient beings, the Dharma of manifesting illness. Some commentaries say manifesting the Dharma of poverty. Poverty refers to illness, needing to collect alms, and so on. This is done to guide sentient beings. So you still go, take the milk without shame. He said, here, you continue on. Ānanda was hesitant, wondering if he had relied on the wrong teacher. There was no way around it, because although he had been closed for such a long time, sometimes he himself also felt very ashamed. The commentary on the Tang translation should be by Master Kuiji. Commentary on the scripture spoken by Vimalakirti says, "My mind and wisdom are far from the Buddha. I cannot know the Buddha." Venerable Ānanda said that although he had been a personal attendant for a long time, it seemed his mind was still very far from the Buddha. He did not truly know the Buddha's secret intent. Sometimes some of our disciples are the same. They may have relied on their master for many years, but they still do not understand what the master is thinking, or what makes the master happy or unhappy. Just like Venerable Ānanda. Ānanda stayed by the Buddha's side for so many years. If even he did not know after over 30 years, then there is even less to be said for others. Sometimes being physically close to the master does not necessarily mean you have truly drawn close to him. As we saw just now, he had some doubts previously. But then the voice from the sky said, "Ānanda, it is as the retired scholar has said. It is just that the Buddha has appeared in this evil age of the 5 corruptions," referring to the corruptions of afflictions, views, lifespan, beings, and the kalpa. He manifests before these beings to guide and emancipate them. So the voice told him, "Go, Ānanda, take the milk without shame. There is no need to feel ashamed. It is perfectly fine." The voice from the sky offered him comfort. Otherwise, he might have returned without collecting the milk. And so he continued on his way. The story I told earlier about him, encountering the mother cow, can be connected here. In the end, he successfully obtained the milk. Thus, these manifestations of the Buddha are also very important. Everyone should understand that the term manifestation is very important. In certain passages of the Vinaya, we find a similar situation. There is a specific account in the Vinaya that goes like this. Once it seems the Buddha went to accept a meal offering. Venerable Ānanda accompanied him. However, the food had not yet been fully cooked. Ānanda was concerned about the Buddha's physical well-being. The Buddha had also just recovered from an illness. Undercooked food would not be good for his health, so Ānanda immediately went outside to gather firewood to cook the meal again. Then the Buddha came by and asked what he was doing. Ānanda replied that their food was not yet cooked. "So I was about to cook it once more," he said. "Otherwise it may not be good for your body." The Buddha did not stop him and said, "Excellent, excellent." So sometimes we see that in the daily circumstances of the Buddha's life, he seems just like an ordinary person. Although he possesses a Vajra body, it appears that if the food is not cooked properly, it is not good for his digestion. In all these various aspects, we should be able to discern what to accept and reject. This is the conduct of a wise disciple of the Buddha. Therefore, the voice told Ānanda to continue collecting the milk. At that time, the sky gave forth this kind of voice. Then Ānanda went to the Brahmin's house to collect the milk. The story concludes in this way. World-honored one, the eloquence of Vimalakirti's wisdom is like this. When I was collecting alms, he also rebuked me. His wisdom is truly remarkable. Therefore, I cannot accept your instruction to go inquire about his illness. So all of the above accounts are from the Buddha's 10 great disciples. Including Ānanda, there are 10 great disciples in total. The Buddha asked each of them one by one. But it was not only these 10 great disciples who were asked. These 10 great disciples are just the primary representatives. There were also 500 other disciples. The Buddha requested that each of them go and inquire about Vimalakirti. And in similar fashion, each disciple did not dare to go. They each explained their original encounters and karmic conditions. However, these have not been narrated one by one in the text. The stories of the 10 great disciples are already quite extensive. If the stories of all 500 disciples were included here, the Vimalakirti Sutra would be far too long. It would probably take several years just to finish it. Fortunately, the text focuses on these representatives one. Sometimes when receiving teachings, such as in tantric traditions, we receive them through selected representatives, while others receive them through different means over time. This approach has been a practical necessity since ancient times. So the Buddha's 500 disciples each explained their original encounters. They related their individual causes and conditions, and all those stories have been shared. They related what Vimalakirti, the layman, had said to each of them. Actually, if their stories were available, there would likely be 500 different types of afflictions. The situations of these 500 people are all unique. I often think to myself that if the stories of the afflictions of each of those 500 disciples were recorded, they would probably be very fascinating. If we had more time, we could narrate them slowly, But currently, such a complete text does not exist in this world. Therefore, they were unable to accept the instruction to go inquire about him. As the text says, each said he was unable to accept. Each of the 500 disciples said the same. You see, Vimalakirti, the layman, is extremely formidable. Not only the 10 great disciples, but all 500 disciples. The other 490 disciples were also asked to go, and all of them said that they did not dare. Vimalakirti, the layman, remains truly impressive. Among lay people, there are certainly some very powerful individuals. Monastics should not simply think, I am a monastic, and therefore you lay people must always kneel before me, because you are merely lay householders, treating lay people as if they were of a very low status with such words. In Buddhism, this is indeed the case within the Pratimoksha, but in the Mahayana, it mainly depends on a person's level of realization. If their realization is profound, a layperson can also be very outstanding. All of the above is called the chapter on disciples. This is the Shravakayana chapter on disciples. In other versions, such as the Sanskrit and Tibetan texts, it is combined with the following chapter on bodhisattvas. There is no division into separate chapters between them. However, in the translations by Jichen and Xuanzang, as well as many other Chinese translations, the chapters are divided in the middle. So these differences are not very significant. It is merely that the names and divisions of the chapters differ. In Sanskrit, it remains the same as in the Tibetan version. Therefore, if we want to study the Vimalakirti Sutra, one approach is from a research perspective, understanding it from that academic angle. Another approach is through Buddhist faith and practice. By understanding it from this spiritual angle, one can perhaps fully and comprehensively grasp the meaning of this sutra. Otherwise, if we only look at it on a research level, we might not be able to grasp the content related to faith. Conversely, if we only interpret it from the level of faith, the differences between various versions, and the precise, rigorous logic of many terms and concepts might not be entirely clear to us. I hope everyone receives this sutra in their own way. Very well, we will stop here for today.
Om Bandhangara Padma Sadar